Good morning. It was about 20 years ago, I stood before you, ponytail and all. And I was talking to you about cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitors and necrotizing enterocolitis. And it was one of the proudest days of my life until today. Today, I'm proud to introduce Dave Powell and the address to the membership. And when I had this conversation with Dave, what should I say? He said, please don't make it about me. And so I thought, I'll make it about you. And I'm going to ask you, what are you proud of? What are you proud of in your careers or in your lives? And I want you to turn to your neighbors and talk for 30 seconds. What are you proud of in your lives? Turn to your neighbors, 30 seconds. What are you proud of? Have a little conversation. I know you can do it. I know you can do it. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you. You guys just jumped right across the awkwardness and you jumped right in. I appreciate it. And while I would love to hear some of the things that you said and some of the things that you talked about, when I asked Dave Powell the question what he was most proud of, he said very quickly, he was most proud of his fellows. And we just happen to have some of his fellows in the room. And I want to give them an opportunity to very briefly make a short tribute to Dave Powell and how Dave has touched their lives.
Dave is an inspirational teacher who has stressed to me to continuously ask why and how can we do it better. To think outside the box and challenge the status quo while striving to improve, to do more always. He is the quintessential model of a humble leader, and he has always been a wonderful support when the going got rough.
Dave Powell always said he wanted to become the world's best first assistant. He always wanted to let the fellow lead the case, and he strove to set you up to succeed in the operation, and that's something that I also try and do now.
Dave Powell always said that a little humor is a good thing, and it helps you and the family relax.
Our Thursday 6 a.m. meetings have been a highlight of my fellowship. You've taught me pearls for the operating room, counseled me on life after fellowship, helped me through a devastating complication, and made me laugh at your ridiculous stories. Thank you, Dave Powell.
Dave taught me about discovery rounds, where the fellows and trainees do not pre-round prior to rounding with the attending, and it was the best mental health break I've ever had, and the one I continue with my trainees as well.
When I was in DC in '97, Dave was the young junior faculty, innovative guy, and the only person doing laparoscopic pull-throughs for Hirschsprungs. And as an incredible coincidence, 100% of our consults for Hirschsprungs happened on Dave's calls. So every child in DC got a laparoscopic pull-through for Hirschsprungs, and thank you for teaching me that operation, Dave.
Sometimes fellowship can be kind of a crazy situation for a variety of reasons, but having talked with Dave weekly during my fellowship, he provided a sense of context that kind of brought me out of my own head and really helped me kind of make it.
So everyone always wanted to be in Dave Powell's operating room. They knew they were going to have a good day, from the anesthesiologist to the scrub nurse. We would have fun and we would learn something, but the person who had the best time was the fellow across the table from him.
Dave is a consummate educator using adult learning theory, skill and humor and wit to help make us the best surgeons. Using one of his favorite terms, he created the optimal milieu to make us the best surgeons we could be.
In the face of the COVID pandemic, Dave allowed me to be human. He shared his passion for pediatric surgery. He's an active listener, and he fostered my individuality and hope within myself. Thanks.
I'm going to give a little co-credit here, but 4 of the best years I've had in my professional career were sitting on PSAP, writing questions led by John Waldhausen and Dave Powell. And I learned a lot about thinking out of the box and the development of what has led to a lot of the stuff that Dave is now sharing here. So it's been wonderful to watch that progression, and thank you, Dave, for all those contributions. Thanks, Gene.
Thank you for this tribute. Give them a round of applause. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate that you helped me pull this off. What I learned from Dave is that there's always this precious moment when the family expresses love and gratitude to us because we just saved little Johnny or little Joanna's life because we took out their appendix. And that moment to them is really precious because they want to thank us. And I invite you to, rather than saying, oh, it's nothing, it's just my job, we do this every day, it's nothing, to say thank you. Because for them, it's not nothing. To them, it's everything. Thank you, Dave. Thanks. Dave Powell, and the authenticity of the hymn.
Thanks, Wolfgang, and thank you all. You know, when you ask your fellows to do the introduction, you're assuming you're going to get roasted. That was even worse. It's maybe hard to get started. And then he said, Wolfgang says, while I'm doing my introduction, just go over here and like carve some stuff or do some tools or whatever. And so we're already way behind schedule. But thank you guys so much. It is totally true. I remember, we all interview our fellows. We all do interviews. And there's that time at the end of the day when you've said all you wanted to say and the interviewees have said all the questions they want to say, and it's just awkward space. And I was in one of those situations when the interviewee, the potential trainee, just had completely run out of questions and said, Dr. Powell, what are you most proud of? And it wasn't even a heartbeat. It wasn't even a heartbeat before I just said my fellows. And I'm so happy that Wolf and everybody got a chance to participate in it, but for me, has been a really, really cool morning already, so thank you so much. All right, I have no commercial disclosures, but I do have a couple of personal ones. I'm a little bit nervous up here. I don't usually get nervous talking to people or crowds, but I'm a little bit nervous about this for a couple of reasons. One is, in this room, we have 922 of the smartest, most passionate, most credible, best-looking people on the planet. And I've been given now 51 minutes to engage, educate, and maybe entertain you. That's pretty nerve-wracking for me. The second thing is, because of what you guys decided, I am completely out of my comfort zone. This is not going to be a talk I have ever given before. I can also guarantee this is a talk you've never heard before. But you've asked me to talk about multiple subjects. I hate doing that. You asked me to talk about a lot of details. I hate doing that. You've asked me to talk about stuff that I'm not really an expert in. We all hate doing that, right? This is my wonderful, wonderful family. A lot of them are here this morning, so thanks you guys for taking time out and coming by. I really appreciate not your support, but your contribution to what has made me successful and made me what I am. In that picture, though, there are two people who deserve, of course, special mention. I love this picture. Pat and I spent a long time trying to figure out what photo to do so that I could honor her as much as I do. I chose this one. She doesn't like it, but I do. I do. I like it for a bunch of reasons. One is because we're a lot younger than we are now, and it looks better. The real reason I like it is because if you look closely, at least to me, it's obvious, that guy loves that girl so much. Now we're both crying. He loves her so much he doesn't even notice that like 6 inches behind him, if he takes a step back, he's gonna fall off a cliff. And if you look closely, Pat has her arm right behind him, grabbing onto my belt buckle. She knows she's afraid of heights, and she's not going down. So Pat, thank you so much for being the person who's put up with me in life on the edge. Here's the second person who's most important to me. What did I say yesterday in the business meeting? I never cry. Yeah, apparently I lied. I hope I don't offend anybody. There are a lot of super intelligent, genius people in this room, but that guy right there is the smartest of all of you. It's my dad, Robin Powell. My dad taught me a lot of things. Taught me how to throw a baseball, how to ride a bike, how to compute pi to an infinite number of decimals. Of course, I didn't stick because he tried to do it when I was 4 years old. But he taught me two other really important things. And one is, your time is valuable. Every person in this room, your time is valuable. So if you decide to donate some of that time to a problem, it better be an important one. It better be an important problem. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but pediatric inguinal hernia and appendicitis, those are not on the greatest global disease burden list. What is malaria. My dad spent most of his career researching malaria. In 2004, when malaria was at its peak, I forgot what Dad knows better than I do, 18 million deaths, something like that. That's a lot of problem. That's a lot of global disease burden. The second thing my dad taught me was that if you're going to take on an important problem like that, you shouldn't expect to fix it overnight, right? He taught me that incremental change is still change, and short changes all added up into big change. So in 2004, the global incidence of malaria started to come down. In fact, in 2018, it was down to 400,000 deaths a year. Still a ton, but a lot less than the millions and millions it was before. Unfortunately, probably due to climate change and its effect on the mosquito life cycle, it started to come back up again. And the fact of the matter is, every year in the world, every day, 1,300 kids die from malaria. Dad, I know we just celebrated your 90th birthday. I think you need to get back to work, man. All right, here's the problem, and I need some help with this. Earlier this winter, we distributed a survey through the 2-minute turnover emails about what you wanted to hear about. One of my tenets in life is that the teacher shouldn't determine what the learner learns. It should be the learner who tells the teacher what they want to learn, how they want to learn it, and when they want to learn it. So it occurred to me that we needed to get a survey to you guys to figure out what you wanted to hear about. There were 4 potential choices that I thought were reasonable and might be valuable to the audience. And one choice I threw in as a joke. Well, the joke is on me. I could have handled a good vintage for pediatric surgeons. I'm disappointed that that was so unpopular. I thought we had some wine drinkers in this association, but apparently not. Or you were just too hungover to take the survey, I don't know. Teaching versus telling, being a curious pediatric surgeon, saving more lives. I could have worked with those. I'd be up here not crying and giving a regular talk. Making a dovetailed one-hinge box with hand tools. I was not prepared for that. I got to wonder why, right? We should ask why all the time. Why did that come up? Well, there's a couple of potential reasons I can think of. One, you're all closet woodworkers and you want to know how to do this thing. Raise your hand if you're a woodworker. Yeah, they didn't have the same numbers on the bar up there. The second thing is, maybe we need a diversion. We live, breathe pediatric surgery 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. At this meeting for 4.5 days, we are going to do nothing but talk about pediatric surgery. We have great jobs. I love doing that. But my suspicion is every now and then you need a little change of pace. So maybe that's why you chose that. Or, kind of like when you go to a hockey game expecting a fight to break out, you're expecting me to cut my finger and there'll be blood spurting all over the stage. And I have asked some of the trauma committee members to make sure they brought their Stop the Bleed kits, so we're not going to let anything get out of hand. I don't know how it happened, but this is what is really challenging to me to talk about multiple subjects in a short period of time that have nothing to do with each other. When Jen gave me these results, my first response was, we're going to lie, and we're going to say something else. But I made the commitment, I'll stick with it. How many of you have hobbies? Dance, photography? That's really good to hear. You and I call them hobbies or arts and crafts. If you're a psychologist, you call it diversion therapy. There is actually really good evidence on the benefit of diversion therapy. The first good articles were following World War II when they taught Australian veterans with PTSD returning from World War II how to do embroidery. The vets who learned embroidery did much better when it came to their PTSD syndrome, PTSD symptoms. Engaging in a creative hobby, and I think that's part of it. It can't just be crossword puzzles, or it can't just be reading a book. Those are all great things, and I love that. But the real benefit comes from engaging your mind, not just in a distraction, but in creating something, using your brain to create an entity, like photography, like dance, like the arts, or like woodworking. If you engage in a creative hobby, it decreases your stress, increases your sense of well-being, and improves the ability to form communities. That was the biggest take-home from the Australian paper. When you have PTSD, you don't want to talk to anybody. You are completely alone. And those vets came back and formed their own communities. Physiologically, it decreases pulse and blood pressure, decreases cortisol, and releases dopamine in the brain. If you do not have a hobby, you need to get one. If you need help, talk to the person next to you, because it looks like we all have hobbies. Good on you. Photography. This is a really, really cool picture. Does anybody know who took this picture? Brad Warner. This is not the last shameless plug I'm going to give for the foundation auction. But I think this is in the silent auction, right, as long as with a couple of his other pictures. This is a phenomenal picture. Brad knows his stuff. He really, really does. It's a great hobby, too. All right, who can tell me what this graph is? It is not the stock market. It is not my EKG. It's close, though. This is a graph, completely arbitrary. The horizontal axis is my age in years. The vertical axis is my potential to help the planet. The case, that first part, that fibrillation part early, that's teenager. And every one of your graphs looks exactly the same, right? Let's talk a little bit about that first trough. I went to a very prestigious undergraduate school. I won't name it because I'm about to badmouth it. And that school prided itself on successfully getting pre-medical students into medical school, so much so that there was an unofficial dean of the pre-medical students. We all took organic chemistry our first semester as a sophomore, and that was the gatekeeper, if you will, to medical school. Some people are nodding their head. Did you love organic chemistry as much as I hated it? Yeah. It was okay. I was doing okay, and I was doing okay in my other school. The grade for organic chemistry was based on one final exam you had at the end of the semester. And that was on purpose, because they were trying to put pressure on you to weed you out as to who they would write their letters for medical school. It's just totally cruel, but it is what it is. So I turned up and got my little blue notebook. I don't think you guys use little blue notebooks anymore for college classes. Got my blue notebook, and on the cover is written a big red C with a little note, please go see Dean Smith, name withheld to protect him. Go see Dean Smith at 2:15 p.m. Well, that can't be good. So at 2:15, I show up to his office, the secretary is there outside, and another student is coming out of the dean's office sobbing in tears. Well, that can't be good either. So the secretary shows me into the office. I sat down across the desk. The dean looked up, had a list of papers, and said, Mr. Powell. He always liked to call you Mr. as if you're never going to get the doctor part. Mr. Powell, I see you got your C in organic chemistry. You need to change your career path because you are never getting into medical school. There are really good jobs in big pharma. I left the office. I was crushed. I'd wanted to be a doctor like my dad. Forever, I just was crushed. Fortunately for me, I decided not to take his advice, and 2 years later, turned back into that same office, walked right past that secretary without asking permission, walked right into that office, slapped down on that old wooden desk in front of him my 7 acceptance letters to medical school and said, "Go screw yourself." Although I didn't use the word screw. Now, how many in this room have had to overcome an obstacle to get to where they are? Everybody. The purpose of me telling that story is not to brag that I got a bad grade in college. Stuff happens. The reason to tell that story is because this dean was supposed to be an excellent teacher. And as a teacher, he had approached me as a learner without any questions, without asking. He wasn't curious at all what happened to me. If he had been the least bit curious, he would have learned that for the 3 days prior to that organic chemistry final, a couple of us were trying to keep one of our friends from committing suicide. If he had asked me, been the least bit curious, he would have found out that there were no mental health resources for undergraduates on that campus at that time. That's a million times, literally a million times better now. But he would have learned that a zillion years ago and done something about it. If he had been the least bit curious, he would have said, "Dave, why did you get this C when all your other grades are A's?" If he'd been the least bit curious, he would have learned something I learned decades later, that you can't get admitted as an inpatient until after 7 a.m. nurses change shift in a hospital. Unfortunately for me, my organic chemistry test was at 7 a.m. So I showed up at 50 minutes late for a 1-hour test. I got 60%, and if he'd been curious, he would have said, "Hey, that's awesome for taking a 1-hour test in 10 minutes. If, as a teacher, you are not curious about your learners, you are wasting a lot of their time, and you are wasting all of your time. First message, be curious about your learners. I could show this gratuitous, really hilarious, great video, but instead there's a QR code, or search Google for the Ted Lasso dart scene. I don't know if you've seen it or not. It is not just entertaining, it is a super, super good message. It might even be worth the Apple TV subscription just to watch this one scene. It's so good. These are the people who have had big impacts on my life. I know them as friends, mentors, coaches, colleagues, bosses, trainees. 2 of those people there are a lot younger than I am. Message being, if you pay attention to everyone around you, you will be a better person. You don't have to be the expert in the room. Everybody has something to offer you. One of those happens to be Wolfgang. Thank you, Wolfgang. All those people, in addition to being teachers, in addition to being surgeons, are all authentic. This is the dictionary definition of authentic, of undisputed origin or genuine. Well, that's true for all those people I showed you. Accurate and reliable. That's true of all those people I showed you. True to one's own personality, spirit, or character. That is absolutely true of all those people that I showed you. Made or done in the traditional or original way. That's not really true of any of those people that I showed you, but it is true about what we're going to talk about later. How many of you have heard this saying, you be you? If you go to Google and ask phrases, it shows you a graph of usage. This one is like off the charts after the last year or two. And oftentimes when someone tells you, you be you, you take that as confirmation that you need to be authentic. How many of you have trained or spent time in the South? So there's a saying in the South, you got what it is, oh, you're precious. Yeah, which translated means you're a stupid, pathetic being. It's just, they're polite down there. When I hear you be you, what I translate that into is, I'm right, you're wrong, but you can choose to still be stupid. This is not an entitlement to be authentic. We often use authenticity. I'm glad Annie talked about it earlier in the week. We often use authenticity as an excuse. If someone says something derogatory about somebody else, well, they're just being authentic, they're being honest. That is not true, they're being rude. If someone makes a decision that affects you but doesn't check with you first or get your input, they're being authentic because they just want to get something done. That's not true. They don't care about you. If you're a politician who's a narcissist, misogynist, criminal, and people give you credit for that because they're just being you, I got 3 words for you. Authenticity is not enough. It may be part of the problem, but to be really successful, you have to think about your own authenticity and figure out where that matches in the needs of the rest of the planet. I'm going to do one of Wolfgang's drills. Take just a couple of seconds now. Think to yourself what you really believe in. What would your life look like if you were truly authentic? When you're your most happy, where are you in life? Just think about it for a couple of seconds. You can close your eyes if it helps, but now, the issue with being authentic is it's just not what you think. It's just not what you think. It is your actions and your behaviors as well. Now, I could ask you all to do that same reflection. Tell me about what your actions say about you, but you'd all lie, right? You're all biased to yourself. So I'm going to suggest review what you thought was authentic for you. What is your authentic self? And then in a couple of days, talk to someone who's a close, personal, honest friend, maybe a spouse, maybe a colleague, and say, hey, what do you think my beliefs are? And my suspicion is for a lot of us, your beliefs of you will be a little bit different than others' beliefs of you. And there's a message there, right? You need to get your act together. So being authentic is not sufficient. You need to figure out that intersection between your tiny little authenticity and what the needs are for the rest of the world. All right, let's talk about how to make a dovetail joint with hand tools, because that was number 2. We've gone long enough talking about education. First, you need to flatten the board with a hand plane down to the thousandth of an inch. Then you cut it with a crosscut saw on this thing called a bench hook. Then you take it over to the shooting board. We need a different name for that tool, by the way, the shooting board, given the #1 cause of death in kids. So you take it over to the plane, take it with the plane over to the shooting board, mark out your dovetails. Don't forget to X the places where you don't want to cut. Don't ask me why. Use a marking gauge to determine the thickness of your board. Set their baseline on your boards. Cut them with a dovetail saw, and then try and align things so that you can transfer the tails to the pins. Does everybody have that so far? Of course you don't. That was way too much information. It was delivered without content or context. There was no why like we've done this week. There's no reason why. There's no reason for you even to think about that, even if you were a woodworker and wanted to do hand tool woodwork and dovetails. That just was not helpful. For my first experiment, I need 3 volunteers from the audience, please. Oh, I think I see some innocent volunteers over here. Come on up. You all were wondering what the pool was about, right? This is the APSA Learning Objective Wet Lab. All right, come on up. Now, I've never met you before, have I? No, and you signed the release with Dr. Tracy for liability. All right. What I need you first to do is to put on these goggles. Wait, I'll take that. Goggles. Put on a raincoat. You know, I told you you'd never see this at APSA before or again. All right. Here's another raincoat. And we'll get to the rest of that in a second. If you want, you can stand in the pool. I spent all night, I think I got a pneumothorax blowing that thing up last night, so you better go in the pool. All right, you need a raincoat?
I need a raincoat.
Safety gear.
Yeah.
All right, there's the other cup, all right.
Why do we need a raincoat?
You'll find out in a second. Patience volunteer, who I don't know before. So for me, true learning represents a change in behavior. I don't care, I do care. You're scared? Yeah. You should be. At any rate, learning represents, if I'd known I'd have a peanut gallery, I would have picked different volunteers. So at any rate, for me, true learning represents a change in behavior. I am happy to teach you knowledge and factoids and all that other stuff, but if I'm going to spend my time as a teacher for you as a learner, I want that to be represented in a change in your behavior. Better patient care, better outcomes, a zillion different variables, but you need to change your behavior and not just be able to pass a test. Well, how does that happen? That happens by taking the information that I'm teaching you and putting it in a long-term memory. You have to be able to recall that learning, those concepts, in order to change behavior. Well, how does stuff get into long-term memory? Well, first it goes to short-term memory. And the thing about short-term memory is it can handle perhaps dozens of concepts all at the same time, but it only holds on to them for a very short period of time, measured in seconds to minutes. Short-term memory is how you can drive to work in the morning, listen to the radio, deal with the traffic, review the cases you're going to go over, then get to work and go, now what route did I just take to work this morning? That's short-term memory, because none of those concepts ever get further down. After short-term memory, things need to get into working memory, which is exactly the opposite of short-term memory, and that's our problem. Short-term memory can hold on to things for longer, hours to days, but has a very narrow bandwidth. It can only handle 2 or 3 concepts at a time. You just have to trust me on this. As you get older, that bandwidth gets narrower and narrower and narrower, and the number of concepts you can handle gets smaller as well. Now, if the concept is in working memory, it's called working for a reason. If you use the concepts in working memory to solve a problem, if you use the concepts in working memory, or you can file those with other things in your long-term memory, then those concepts will move from working memory into long-term memory. Our experiment today is to determine how many concepts a pediatric surgeon can admit into short-term memory before it overflows and never gets to long-term memory. Our scared person? Do you want to stand in the pool? It's just your size. All right. So over here, this volunteer, this big bucket represents long-term memory. Remember, it is big. It can hold a lot of facts. It's deep. It can hold them forever.
I can fit into that.
Second volunteer, I want you to hold this hose, because that's working memory, right? That's long. It can hold on to things for a long time, but it's very skinny, so it can't handle many concepts at the same time. Do you want to get in the pool?
Got it.
In the wet lab, I'm sorry, excuse me. And then just hold the hose right over the brain. All right. Come on over. No offense, but you're short-term memory, dude, all right? I want you to hold the platter, because this represents short-term memory. It's really broad. It can handle lots of concepts at the same time.
Did you say you want me to
But it spills over. Yeah, hold the platter. All right. Now, I'm going to ask you to take this measuring cup down there so you can measure the amount of concepts that come through working memory and get into long-term memory. Hold on, I forgot something. Oh, gee, oh man, water is really heavy. I'm so sorry. Hold on. Oh. Someone might need to call housekeeping, sorry. All right. So I have about a cup of concepts right here. We're going to pour them into short-term memory and see how many get over to long-term memory. Any coming through yet?
Yep.
All right. We're not spilling much. Good job, short-term memory. We're not spilling much of this. You're doing a really good job. Thank you. All right. I'm going to call that equal to a single learning objective, kind of like a tech talk or some of the break shops we've done. How much came out through into the cup down there? Yeah, that's not cups. I need cups. One. There you go. So 1 in, 1 out. That's pretty good. So one limited learning objective can make it through short working and to get to long-term memory. Oh, man. This water is really heavy. I'm so sorry. Oh, geez. This represents a trauma committee session. I love the trauma committee like I love all my committees, like all my children. But I went to a trauma committee meeting once. I've got to set this down, sorry. I went to a trauma committee meeting where there was a 15-minute proposal. Yeah, now you see where the protective gear comes in, right? Where there was a 15-minute presentation with 89 slides. The slides were going faster than a motion picture. So we'll have to see. All right, are we ready? How much of this do you think is going to make it past short-term memory to get into working memory and get down into long-term memory?
I can't even remember the question.
Yeah. Okay. Are we ready? I'm so glad when my family sat in the front row, they sat over there and not over here. All right, are we ready? Are you ready?
We're ready.
All right. I'm going to stand back over here just to see. Yeah, all right, ready? Do we need a countdown? Whatever. 3, 2, 1. Oh. All right, I wouldn't get them wet. Bottom line, I think you get the message, though. Thanks to our volunteers. All right. So that was our first experiment. Bottom line is, if you try and overload your learners with too much information, they're only going to remember the first cup. You can take those as souvenirs if you want. They're only going to remember the first couple things that you say anyway. So please do not try. This is one of the most commonest things we see at the movie and at the meeting and half the sessions. I see it at almost every Grand Rounds lecture I go to. Bam, 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 through the slides. That just isn't helpful. You're wasting your time, half your time, and the learners aren't going to learn anything anyways. All right. Back to the graph. This one's going to be really hard. I don't think I've shared this with hardly anybody, except for Marisa. The second trough. Oh, let's talk good news. There are some parts in the graph that are upsloping. The good parts for me, matching in this wonderful specialty of pediatric surgery. Happiest day of my life, probably. Second happiest day after marrying my lovely wife, who keeps me from falling off a cliff. The second part there, the second thing after the trough, that's when I did my master's in education. That was a transformational experience for me. Not just in terms of how I was a teacher, but how I talked to other people, how I organized committees, all those other things. It really was kind of a advanced leadership thing rather than just a master's in education. But it really transformed the way that and I wouldn't be talking to you today if I hadn't done it as well. That last little hump, does anybody know what that is way up there? That's when I decided that if I was going to make a difference, if I was going to take on an important problem, that I needed to do it through APSA. This is the best organization ever. All right, second trough. This'll talk about crying. You can see that after that first debacle as a sophomore in college, I kept going up. I went to med school. I was actually out in practice. That's when the wavy stuff comes back in again. I want to say I was probably 6 or 7 years in practice. And that was a time when we were kind of short-staffed in DC, and I think one year I did 1,100 cases. But I was loving every minute of it. My kids were getting taken, my patients were getting taken care of. I was making a ton of money for the hospital, so my boss liked me. I was getting lots of referrals, and that explains why I was doing all the anaplasties. I was doing really great. And then I went to a tumor board, and I was asked to operate on a toddler with an abdominal mass that had been interpreted by the radiologist as a Wilms tumor. Took that kid to the operating room, and this happens all the time. You juniors need to be ready for this. In the abdomen, in the patient, was not the same as on the CT scan. Got a little bit anxious, said something's not right here, did a biopsy, put in a port. Biopsy came back as Wilms tumor. Kid got chemotherapy, tumor shrunk a little bit. Oncology calls me up and said, time to do the nephrectomy now. Went back in there. The tumor in person did not look anything like the CT scan again. But I had 2 biopsies now showing, actually we did an intraoperative biopsy, 2 biopsies showing Wilms tumor. I had a radiology looked at Wilms tumor. I had the chemo for Wilms tumor and got a little bit smaller. We did the operation. Took the retractors out, and I had a huge, huge complication and misadventure. After several more operations, the patient died in the ICU a couple of days later. That's that trough. I was totally crushed. I was going to retire. I was done with pediatric surgery. I was not a good surgeon. I couldn't take care of patients. I got the normal amount of peer support from my colleagues at that time, which is to say none. One of them even suggested that I shouldn't be operating on cancer kids anymore, which was never going to happen because they weren't operating on cancer kids either. It really was bad. I was a total waste in the clinic. Is Linda here today? I didn't see her come in. She must be, where is she? Stand up, Linda. There she is. So the person who just stand up, Linda Haga, who has a new name, she was my clinic, not my clinic nurse, we were clinic partners together. I learned more from Linda than anybody else in my whole life. I cannot even imagine how I would have gotten by without her. For those 2 months that I was a waste. I was horrible. And after about 2 months, fortunately no other patients had had bad complications, and Linda had basically shepherded me through clinic and made sure that I didn't make any huge mistakes. I saw on my clinic list for the day a patient with the same last name as the child who had died 2 months earlier from my complication. And I thought, that's really, really weird. I'm kind of scared to go in there. What could that possibly be? So fortunately, Linda and I went in together because I never would have made it. And in that room was the mother of the patient who had died. And I had forgotten in my own grief that she had been pregnant at the time that we were operating on our son. And with her, she had brought her new baby in and wanted to know, could I examine the baby to make sure that he didn't have the same tumor that his brother had had? And then they had trusted me so much, even though I'd done this horrible thing. She wanted to know if I could be their regular pediatrician. And of course, that was a horrible, horrible idea. But the process of accepting that gratitude from that patient's mother, that's the upslope part of that graph, right? That's the upslope part of that graph. Thank you, Linda, for being who you are. I wouldn't be here without you. Thanks. And my suspicion, every one of those people who stood up at the introduction would say the same thing about Linda. So let's talk about the fallacy of the teachable moment. Back when I was just really horrible with myself and wanting to retire, all that other stuff, and this probably happens to you when you get a complication or things haven't gone well. One of the senior colleagues came over, put his arm around me and said, "Dave, this is a teachable moment." That is not true. That is not true at all. Emotions and learning are completely interdependent. They go to the same parts of the brain. They are the same thing. You cannot separate them at all. If you are on the right side of that graph, the joy side of that graph, let's say you have a multi-trauma patient who you save and goes home, or a really complicated tumor case that does well, or some really multiple anomaly baby that you've done 20 operations on and they finally get to discharge. You are a Superman. You are on top of the world. You think you can't do anything wrong. You are not teachable at that time. I'm glad you're happy about it, but you are not teachable because you don't think you need to learn anything. At the other end of the spectrum, if you've had a bad complication like I did, or a bad day, and you're in that sadness, misery part, you're not teachable either. You and your brain need to concentrate on recovery and getting over it. It turns out that on that graph, you're really only teachable when you're moving through the middle part. So please, don't tell somebody who's had a complication it's a teachable moment. They need to be healing, they need to call the peer support line, and they need to get over that before you try and teach them anything. I hate that. I do hate that term because it's so misused. All right, we have 16 minutes. Should we make some sawdust? I don't know if you guys want, if you just want, I'll go cut myself and we can spill some blood and we can have it, if that's what you really want to say. All right, let's talk a little bit about wood. Wood is stronger by weight than steel. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, wood, unlike steel, is anisotropic. Does anybody know what that means? Depends on what direction. Exactly right. What is the most valuable currency on the planet? It's not Bitcoin, it's not the American dollar, it's not the yuan, it's the banquet drink ticket. Get that man a drink ticket. All right, you're exactly right. So wood has a grain. Remember, the tree goes up and down depending on how you cut it, depending on how the grain is. If you're with the grain, wood is super strong. It's stronger than steel. If you are across the grain, it's a lot less strong. If you're on the end grain of the board, hold on. I didn't have a chance to set up because I was being distracted. So if you're on the long grain of a board, that's really strong. I couldn't break that in a million years. Across the grain, if I went to the gym more, I probably could break that. It's pretty soft wood, it's pine. But the end grain, I can take this pen and just poke that in there and make a million little holes. That's anisotropic. It depends on the direction that you're measuring the stresses across the board. You have to consider those stresses when you're trying to join two pieces of wood, right? In the case we're going to talk about is taking two flat pieces of wood. Oh, man, that's an old man noise. We're taking two pieces of wood and joining them at a 90-degree angle like that. Super typical for a drawer box, maybe a cabinet, kitchen cabinet hanging on the wall, or in our case, a jewelry box. Those pictures I showed you way too fast before, those are real pictures. That's this box. What? This is available for the live auction tonight. So they asked me, what is the value of this box? I don't know. I've never seen one on Etsy. It's a one of a kind. That's the only kind of stuff I build because I'm not good enough to repeat myself. It's a one of a kind box. It's got hand cut dovetails like we're going to try here if we have time. I don't want to get that cactus in the wrong place. And it's got a hidden wood hinge in the back. I'll show you that when we change the other camera. But you have to consider the direction of the grain, the anisotropia of the board when you're trying to put them together. This is a butt joint. This is the two pieces of wood just side to side put together. Last night I glued one up. Hold on. That's not it. All right, here's a butt joint. You'll notice in the picture and on this piece of wood, here's the long grain. Here's the long grain. The stress that goes across this joint in this piece of furniture or this box or this cabinet has to be transmitted down the long grain because of anisotropia. Then it jumps across a space, usually an adhesive, and transfers to the other long grain. But in this particular example, in that particular picture, the long grain, end grain, space, long grain. There's no place where two pieces of long grain come together. It's a really weak joint. Should we test it and see? I did glue. I told you this could go either way. I have no idea what's going to happen. This could completely bomb. I'm glad no one got hurt, but there's still opportunity. All right? So let's see. Oh my God. Maybe I haven't gone to the gym enough. So that's a butt joint. It is really weak. That's why you will never hear at this conference somebody get to the microphone and go, that abstract you just presented, that butt joints nicely with some work we're doing in the lab already. All right? Yeah, some people are getting it, some people aren't, I know. Maybe you're not as smart a crowd as I thought. I don't know. All right. This is a dove, and there are 1,000 joints to join wood, right? So we're talking of the two spectrums, a butt joint where there's no strong long grain to long grain, and a dovetail joint. Here you can see the grain going around the corner, but each one of those little nuggets, it's actually the tails on your left, the pins on your right. That's an opportunity for a couple of things. One is for long grain to be intimate with more long grain, so there's strength across that joint. There's also all those interstices and planes. That's places where you can put glue to help hold the things together. Now for a dovetail, it's got that little trapezoidal feature, so it actually holds together and holds its shape really well. I did this one last night too. I'm not ready to do that yet. That's too risky. I'm not doing that yet. All right. These boxes that were made over the last couple of months, they have hand-cut dovetails. How can you tell a hand-cut dovetail from a machine-cut dovetail? Anybody know? It's not always easy, but usually it is. Usually if the dovetails are asymmetric, like on that one, they're not all the same size. That's a hand-cut dovetail, on purpose, that is. If there's little scratch marks right along the base of the dovetail, that's from a marking gauge, and we'll do it if we have time, we'll do that in a second. And so that's the sign that someone used hand tools to cut the dovetail, because for a machine, you just set it up, turn it on, and you don't have to worry about any of the dimensions. It just goes all the way through. Finally, the biggest difference between something that is made by hand and something that is made by machine is the one made by hand always has a mistake. It always will. We can try and be as perfect as we want. We can try and be as precise as we want. We'll talk about that in a second. But there will always be a mistake. That box has a mistake. I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to decrease the value at the foundation auction. Second shameless plug, third shameless plug. I'm not going to tell you, but if you look closely, you will need loops, but if you look closely, you will find the mistake in that box. Does anybody know who the Shakers are? They're really good at making furniture, and you know, they will not sell a piece of furniture that is perfect. They will always incorporate a mistake because only Jesus is perfect. That's the way we look at it. All right, hold on. So what's the big deal about dovetails? Let's talk first about precision. I'm sorry. What does precision mean? Precision means accurate, measurable accuracy. But what your project is and what your goal is determines how precise you want to be. If I'm building a house and framing a house, I only need to be precise. Ray builds houses all the time. 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch for framing maybe. If I'm off by more than that, the house is still going to stand and no one's going to know. If I'm building a box like that, I'm usually trying to be accurate down to the 1,000th of an inch. If I'm operating on a kit and I need a negative margin, I'm probably down to the 1,000,000th of an inch because that means a big deal. So precision depends on what your goal is. It also depends a little bit on your tools. How many of you guys use the robot? Good for you. If you call Intuitive, I have, and ask them what the precision of their instruments are, I have, they will not tell you. They will tell you in their marketing that it is better. Are you going to give me the cactus? Is that why the cactus is moving? All right. I'm getting a little antsy up here. At any rate, they will tell you that it is better than human vision. Well, human vision is 5 to 6 thousandths of an inch, so I'm going to call it 5 to 6 thousandths of an inch. I don't want to piss off the robots. I've seen the Terminator movies. But a human hand can do better. So here we are. This is my happy place. This is my shop. It's never looked so clean, except when I took this picture. There's some hand tools down on the bench. There's a couple of power tools. What do you think is the most accurate tool on that bench? I'll give you a few hints. It's not the circular saw, because that's for building houses. That probably has a maximum accuracy of about 1/10 of an inch, Ray, maybe, something like that, maybe a little bit less. The blades are so bad, you hardly know. To my right, your left, that's a router with a computer in it. It lets you set with accuracy down to 1,000th of an inch. It doesn't cut that close to that, especially on the first path. It's pretty good. The planes, I can get shavings of about 1.5 to 2,000th of an inch, and the saws have a kerf. The blade is spread out somewhere around 4,000th of an inch. All of those numbers I told you for the hand tools were better than the robot. I hope that gives you some job security when you see the robot. There will always, robot, AI is going to replace radiologists. It's going to replace pathologists, I'm sorry. But it is not yet ready to replace surgeons because we're still better than they are. All right, what's the drink ticket? What's the most precise tool on that bench? The hand. How many drink tickets do we have? Because I heard that a lot. The hand. The hand can feel a difference of less than 1,000th of an inch, probably down to 1/2 thou. It's super, super cool. You should be proud of the ones you have. All right. How do you get 1,000th of an inch shaving off a hand plane? Here's some shavings I took last night. We might do it again. These ones are probably about 2,000ths of an inch. I measure that. You guys, the older ones in the room will remember how you determined whether a DPL was positive or not. How did you do that? If you could read through it. So reading through a shaving is, yeah, I can read through that one, so that's pretty good. That's probably about 2,000th of an inch there. The way you get a shaving is to have a really, really sharp blade. Do you guys want to hand those things out? If you haven't met, this is Ben and Alex, 2 nephews. There's no way I was going to put them up there in the wet lab. They're too valuable to me. All right. What they're going to pass out is little pieces of wood. I think I have one left over that I put in my pocket. Here it is. It looks about like this. I know that a lot of surgeons are kinesthetic learners. Some of you may know that. Visual, auditory, reading, kinesthetic. Kinesthetic means you learn by touch or by doing. So they're going to pass out some little tokens. Feel it. You're going to have to pass it around. I could not make 922 of them, so I only made like 200. And the goal here is to feel it. You can fondle wood. One of the reasons why it takes me months to make a box like that, because I fondle it all the time as I'm making it. It just slows the process, but it is what it is. I want you to take that piece of wood, and they'll get back there to you. Once you get done with it, pass it around to somebody else. And there's two sides to that piece of wood. I want you to feel each side, thumb, index finger, whatever is best for you. And I want to hear hear from you whether you think those two sides are different. One side is finished with a power sander and 150 grit sandpaper, which is about the standard for mass market furniture. The other side is with a hand plane. Somebody get up and can you feel the difference? I can. I don't know if you guys. If you can't feel the difference, then buy mass market furniture. Andreas, what do you think?
One side's rougher than the other.
Yeah, correct. So the rougher side is the sandpaper side, even though that's pretty good grit. And grit, for those of you who don't know, is a arbitrary measure of the number of abrasive particles for a surface area on a piece of sandpaper. So higher numbers mean smaller particles, means finer sanding. If I'm sharpening a crude instrument like a lawnmower, 80 grit on my grinding wheel. Most kitchen knives are sharpened to about 500 grit. If it's a really expensive Japanese or German knife, you might do 1,000. My wife demands 1,000 for her knives. Scalpel is something we all know about. That's sharpened to about 8,000 grit. To be honest, scalpels are chemically sharpened. They're not sharpened on a stone, but that tells you about what it is. The blade in this hand plane, the blade that surfaced this one side of this, is sharpened to 16,000 grit. That is really smooth. You can't even sense that. It's smaller than a micron. You can't even sense the particles on that. That's how you get something really smooth, by sharpening it. A lot more than a scalpel. And yes, I've cut myself. That's why we have a first aid kit up here. I've cut myself on these things. Oops, sorry, wrong way. All right, before we make some sawdust, there's one more educational topic we need to talk about. I sometimes visualize in my trying to analog, making connections that really aren't there, a dovetail. It has two parts that come together. That's my little community of practice. So community practice is an educational term that means a group of people, can be small, can be large, hopefully made up of a range of novices to experts, all with expertise in different areas. The goal of a community practice is that you're all aiming in the same direction. You all want the same goal. So on the reception that was Thursday night, I gave one of the little boxes to a table somewhere, and I gave them a box for the table, and I asked them to look at it and try and figure out how this lid opens, because there's no hardware, there's no hinge, there's nothing on this, but it opens and is still attached. What did you guys think? Tell me about the experience of, as a team, as a community, looking at the box, and what did you think? Find a mic in. They were very generous, by the way. I did have to give them all my drink tickets.
We started, everybody kind of passed the box around, messed around with it, and figured out.
You fondled it, I get it, that's okay.
It, yes. None of us had woodworking experience, so there was no expert, but we did have a variety of people. We had faculty, we had fellows, we had research residents, and things along those lines. Eventually, we ended up having people start Googling things like...
see, that is totally cheating.
It's totally cheating.
But I get it. Did you chat GPT it?
No, I don't think we chat GPT'd it. We ended up finding a YouTube video, which go figure, you can YouTube anything nowadays.
And so what did you do? You were innovative learners / cheaters. So how do you guys think the hinge works?
The video we found, essentially, you almost make a dowel and then cut it into pieces, and you glue part of it to the bottom, part of it to the top, and then plane the backside to make it look like there's no hinge.
To make it look like it's not a dowel. So you can't tell it's a dowel, and then there's little metal pins between each of those segments. Do you remember who did the video?
No, I don't.
I bet it was this guy.
It looks familiar.
Yeah, so this is Rob Cosman. Rob's a woodworker, teacher, genius. New Brunswick, Canada. I think he's Canadian. I won't hold that against him. He makes his own tools. All of my tools come from Rob. Not because they're good tools. They super are good tools. But Rob has found that intersection of his passion, his authenticity, which is making things out of wood, and the need for the rest of the planet. And 6 times a year, Rob hosts at no expense to the vets a hand tool woodworking seminar for PTSD and combat wounded vets. They get thousands of dollars worth of tools based on donations. It's called the Purple Heart Project. That's the QR code for it. If you can go there, you can check out Rob. Actually, when I talked to Rob, he was going to come down here and do this for me. He is so interested in meeting us. Unfortunately, I only have 0 minutes. At any rate, he's a really cool guy. I would have put him on my impact my life slide, but the rest of them were surgeons, and so that didn't seem quite right. But he has found that niche of his authenticity, which is hand tool woodworking, and the needs of the rest of the planet, and he does it for combat wounded veterans. Really, really cool guy. All right, we have 0 minutes. I don't want to go over because I'll get the cactus. We didn't get to the woodworking. Maybe, do we have a break right now? Why don't we finish up, and then if you want to come up, and if you guys want to saw, Dr. Tracy will not be here to make you sign a liability waiver, but if you want to saw, we'll do some stuff up close. I do want to thank the AV guys who went way out of their way to do this little setup. And maybe we'll do it on here, but you guys can go break if you want, but how long is the break? 30. Oh, that's like a whole box. No, it's not. Krista, who's running the auction, wanted to know, what should we value this box at? I said, I don't know. It's unique. There's never been one like it. There never will be one like it again. I valued it at 25 inguinal hernia repairs. I should say, it's not just one box. There's another box. Oh man, that's a tight fit. That may be too tight. That may be too precise. No, it's fine. There's another box just like it on the inside. It's a little miniature. And it has the APSA logo engraved on the cover if you want. I didn't think if you bought this and you wanted to give it to your wife or whatever that she'd appreciate having to wake up every morning to the logo of where you're going to work. So there is a small grade. Pretty cool. Yeah, I'm maybe 26 single hernia repairs. It's pretty close. And this is going to be for auction. All right, really quickly, let's summarize what we talked about because we're all space learners. When we hear it again and again and again, we can learn it. Pediatric surgeons need to hear things 3 times. What have we learned? Everybody in this room can benefit from diversional therapy. Your brain needs a break from your super stressful life. You may not be an Australian veteran from World War II with PTSD, but you're pretty close. I've been there. You need something to divert yourself, and it is really helpful if you are doing something creative with that, photography, woodworking, art, all those other things. If you want to do crosswords and puzzles, I'm okay with that too, but being creative is what's the really therapeutic part. I've learned unequivocally that the hand is more precise than the machine. It is so much more calming and pleasant for me to work with hand tools rather than the noise of the machines, the dust floating all around. The hand can be more precise by an order of magnitude almost than at least the current technology in the robots. Now, I don't know that that matters. You know, does it matter that your hand can go down to 1,000th of an inch and the machine can only do 5,000? Does that make a difference for an estimate like leak rate? I don't know. I'll let one of you guys do the randomized control study. All right. And then finally, and this is probably the take-home message, you don't have to be a woodworker to know this. It's really important to be authentic. Figure out what your authentic self is, what your beliefs are. Make sure that matches your behaviors, but you also need to make sure that that authenticity intersects with the need for the rest of the planet. For me, I really think that everybody in this room wants to take better care of their patients. That's my belief, that everybody wants to take better care of their patients. And my intersection with that is working with you all. It's doing the NAT or Ped Surg Library or the committees or being your president. This is the other, I was going to say person, that's how much he means to us. This is Oreo, some of you have met him. I strive to be the person my dog thinks I am. I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm working really hard at it. I want to thank you all for being just the great association that has allowed me to do what I wanted to do for you in my career over the last couple of years. You're going to be in great hands with Dr. Tracy and then Dr. Hayes-Dixon. But I cannot tell you how much it means to me to have been your president. Thank you so much. I appreciate your attention.